Hello and welcome everyone, my name's Capcan and today we're gonna be breaking down Mechabellum units. How are you wanna use them, or in which situations they are good or bad. The game itself is all about countering your opponent, which means that some units are good for some purpose and are bad against some other units, and that's how the game plays. Everything that you need to do is to counter your opponent effectively, to use right tools with right upgrades in order to win in this game. And every single unit has its own tech tree, has its own upgrades that you can purchase throughout the game. You can't really take all the upgrades that are available to the unit and bring all those upgrades with you in combat. You can pick only 4 of them. And today's video is gonna be about Mustangs. Mustangs are a kind of medium in everything. They are medium in price. They're only 200 gold for level 1, for rank 1 units. There are not few of them in their group, and they are not as multiplied as fangs or crawlers, which means that they are somewhat defended against phoenixes and snipers and marksmen that are more like your single target oriented enemies. And they are not as vulnerable to Vulcans, rhinos, and arc lights and tanks as some of your more like infantry units as crawlers or fangs. But they are still quite vulnerable to your AoE units, and you probably don't really want to take many of them if you are against like arc lights and stuff. They're just not as vulnerable as fangs and crawlers, but they are still quite vulnerable to some chunky AoE units that are presented in the game. So Mustangs are very good against air units. They are pretty good against crawlers and fangs. They're pretty good against this massive amounts of enemies. They have some additional upgrades that can make them even more efficient against them. As you can see here, we have high explosive ammo, increases splash damage range by 7 meters, and decreases attack so by 40%. So that means that your attack is going to be lower, but every single shot of Mustang, and they are attacking quite fast, quite frequent, is gonna be with some sort of a splash, and that's definitely gonna destroy all wasps, all crawlers and fangs with ease. But then again, if you are against some beefy target, even if that's like a bunch of phoenixes, it's gonna be even harder task for you to take them down. So then this comes with a downside, and Mustangs, they are mostly kinda good anyways against these small creatures, against the small enemies like crawlers and fangs and wasps. So I usually don't really take high explosive ammo, because it's even because they are already quite efficient, and there are not that many extreme cases where enemy just want to run you down with all these small units. So as you can see, there are 12 units in the pack, in the group in their group that you're buying. They have pretty low HP, pretty low attack. They can target air and ground both. They have pretty low attack interval, so very high attack speed, a pretty okay range, and a very big speed. Now, when it comes to overall tips of the unit, and we're not going deep in your tech first. One thing that you always have to be in mind, that you always have to take in mind, that Mustangs are quite fast, and you don't really want them. Maybe you want them to be on the front line as fast as possible. In that way, yes, you can leave them at the first row of your battleground, but most of the times you want to get them a bit further down. You want to get them you want basically to have this speed be neglected, and you want this speed for them to be in a bit in a like in same position that your front line will be when your forces collapse with the enemy. So yeah, and that means that you're probably quite often gonna position Mustangs further down below the below your base. It's gonna be it's not gonna they shouldn't, quite often they shouldn't be at the avant-garde, and they should be somewhere deep down. Yeah, so that when it comes to their speed, but still can be utilized. You definitely can use them against artillery, sometimes against stormcallers. Because they're fast, they can dodge artillery quite effectively, which means that you can use them as some type of a unit that goes far ahead. It aggroes stormcallers raining down their shots on them. They're just and they are invulnerable to that. But that again, it's more of a tactic when you have your Mustangs as some kind of a just meat that you want to throw at enemies, and you have some other main forces before them, and they are coming after. So yeah, that's for maybe like that kind of tactic. What they are mostly, like really mostly useful against is air. Is quite often both wasps and phoenixes. Against phoenixes they are good because phoenixes can't really attack them too fast. There are 12 units and phoenixes attack speed is quite low, which means that even if they will defeat like 2, 4, or even 6 of them, probably Mustangs still can kill them if there is not a huge range discrepancy between these two units. If the enemy Phoenixes has a bunch of range, they have elite marksmen, and they can just strike you from the safe place, and your Mustangs are aggroed onto some arc lights, then yes, it's not gonna help you, but it's still quite an efficient way to deal with enemy airships. They are very good against wasps, of course. They're pretty good against some small land units again as well, but to be honest, I probably wouldn't really take them only against your land units, because you have way more efficient tools in order to battle those, like arc lights, like vulcans, like sometimes stormcallers. Because Mustangs, if Mustang is against some beefy land units like your balls, like your again arc lights and stuff, it can be challenging for them to hit and destroy those targets, while your stormcallers, for example, your artillery units, they are not gonna have the same problem. And mostly your stormcallers have only problem against fast units like crawlers or rhinos, but Mustangs are not gonna help you against rhinos anyways. So yeah, they are very good at against air. They're pretty good against overlords as well, but with overlords there are more problems, because if your enemy is building towards many overlords, they may have the armor trait that gives them armor with each level that they are upgrading, and it gives a bit of maximum life as well. And if they have like level 2, level 3 overlords, then they may become invulnerable to your Mustang attacks, which is quite effective way to counter the Mustangs at all. And your Mustangs will never have a range advantage against overlords, and they can die quite fast against them as well. So against overlords there's more of a fine-tuning that need to be in place, but against phoenixes and wasps they are just great. Now let's go for their tech, and when do you need to buy some of it, and why is it useful at all. So with our first and obvious stuff that you probably will use it's aerial specialization. It increases attack against aerial units and increases range by 30 when attacking aerial units. It's just very good. So if you have a problem with wasps or phoenixes and you have robust land units that can take enemies' land units without a problem, but you're really struggling against air, against enemy air domination, aerial specialization, and a couple of Mustang packs can really solve the problem. With these, this one means that they will start attacking enemy air units faster than they would have start attack land units, which means that even if there are some, even like if phoenixes are on top of some arc lights or crawlers or balls or tanks, they will just attack phoenixes and first anyways, because they have this extended range in comparison with ground units. So that means that they will target enemy air units faster, and they will target them, they will just prioritize them way better. And this specialization is very good. It's one of the main points that you probably want to use Mustangs, especially at early to mid parts of your game. That's mostly it, and sometimes it's like the only purpose of Mustang being inside the game, but that's not always the case. So this is your first upgrade. It costs 300, but it's still very useful. Then we have just range enhancement in general. This one you can use if you need an advantage in range, maybe combined with aerial specialization. So if there are phoenixes that have both range enhancement and elite marksman, or maybe there are some overlords that you're struggling against, probably against wasps you wouldn't really have too many problems with when it comes to range. But if you need even more bigger range increase, then you can get your range enhancement, but buying this instead of aerial specialization if you have problems with enemy air may be problematic, and it's not really good and useful, because you're not receiving a whopping 75% increased attack, and you're still gonna focus land units more often rather than with aerial specialization. They will just prioritize the enemy air units because they can start attacking them earlier. So yeah, range enhancement is mostly like a thing that you want on top of your aerial specialization, or if you're not dealing against aerial threat and you have this massive amount of Mustangs and maybe you're up against tons of crawlers, tons of fangs, then your range enhancement will definitely be very, very useful, especially against fangs, because this way you will just outplay them completely. They wouldn't be able to attack you at all. With high explosive ammo, I've already said that it's way more situational than any of the other upgrades, because you already have pretty good coverage against these small enemies, and it's not as often that you need even bigger splash, and you don't need to have some sort of single target damage in case if you need that, in case if there is some big strong chunky unit that is gonna be like in between of those small units, and sometimes your Mustangs will attack it, and you need to kill that as fast as possible as well. Then we have our armor piercing bullets. That one increases attack by 50%, so this is just quite good if you are against either more high level units. So for example, you have your Mustangs level 1, you're trying to cover against some against some units like crawlers or fangs or wasps, but they are level 2 or level 3, and you're still just level 1, you've just bought your Mustangs, then you definitely need some additional damage. Or you are struggling with this mixed up forces of enemies where you do have to engage in combat with mix of small enemies and big enemies, and you just need a bit of additional damage. Or maybe you're up against overlords and you have this massive amount of Mustangs that are lying there, but enemies overlords get those armor increases, and you can't really attack, you can't really deal any damage to those overlords at all. This upgrade will definitely help you, because your attack will be way bigger, will be at least a bit bigger than the armor that is provided to Overlord, and probably the damage, if you have this massive amount of Mustangs, will be enough. But to be honest, armor piercing bullets is one of the lowest used upgrades in tech, at least from my own experience for Mustangs, because quite often you either want your aerial specialization that will give you all the damage that you need against air forces, or you're just taking rage enhancement in order to even not give an enemy a chance to come close to you. Whenever you need your armor piercing bullets, it's mixing your Mustangs into something more of a like it's just like mixing their main pluses and trying to create some other type of unit out of them, because mostly you don't want a Mustang somewhere where you need big damage. If you need big damage, you just probably need other type of unit in that place. So that's why armor piercing bullets are less commonly used, at least in my own experience. And then we have our missile interceptor, which is just a fantastic stuff that was buffed, by the way, in previous in one of the previous patches. So missile interceptor, Mustang will attempt to intercept enemy missiles within 150 meters. Battlefield skills cannot be intercepted. Continuous interception over a long time decreases the success rate of interceptions. So what that means? That means that your Stormcaller artillery shots, your fire barrages from Vulcans, your barrages from Overlords, and even missiles, even defense missiles that you're placing for 50 gold, they all can be intercepted by Mustangs, and that's a very, very powerful defense mechanisms against Overlords, against artillery, Stormcallers, and against Vulcans. It works. So if with Vulcan you have this tech upgrades that provides your Vulcan with a barrage of stuff that he shots at enemies, and not only Vulcan, like some other giant units have these barrages as well. But to be honest, Mustangs are quite commonly get countered by Vulcans. That's why I'm talking about Vulcan here. So yeah, he shoots this barrage of missiles at enemies, and he covers the area either in slow oil or in fire that just burns enemies around, and it has pretty big range. It can help against that as well, missile interceptor, but that's quite an expensive upgrade in order to just counter that one ability. And to be honest, Vulcans have no problems defeating Mustangs even without that upgrade. So yeah, it can be used. You can place like one pack of Mustangs behind behind some of your more chunky units like tanks or steel balls, and then to missile intercept those fire barrages. It can be effective sometimes, but it's definitely not like a good upgrade only against that. The most things that it's gonna counter is either artillery or Overlords. Maybe sometimes if your opponent really likes to hit you with a bunch of defensive missiles, this one will work perfectly against that as well. You can defend your units that are quite close to the line of combat, to the line of your avant-garde line. And with missile interceptor, but it's great against artillery, it's great against Overlords, but especially it's very good against Stormcallers. That if you have just like a bunch of these units that are maybe not as fast, and your enemy have bought a bunch of Stormcallers, they've got fire ammunition on them, and they're burning the ground, you can intercept all those missiles with Mustangs and effectively save your whole line of troops with only that skill. And by the way, missile interceptor doesn't scale with Mustang's levels, so if you just need to counter this massive amounts of enemy artillery, you can just buy 2 or 3 or 4, maybe like 2 or 3 Mustang packs and just leave them level 1, leave them somewhat a bit behind your front line, and make them shoot those barrages. But to be honest, you need to be wary of missile interceptor. When they are shooting those rockets, they can't really shoot at enemies, and vice versa. If they are shooting at enemies, at some crawlers or fangs, they wouldn't be able to intercept as many artillery shots, because their attacks are gonna be on the enemy targets in that time. So yeah, that's what Mustangs in their tech and in their stats where they belong. They are, if I was to just like recap everything, they are pretty good against small enemies. They are very good against aerial enemies. They can defend you against artillery and overlords very effectively. But they are still quite vulnerable against AoE, against big HP single units that have good AoE. So yeah, your arc lights, your tanks, your Vulcans are definitely gonna be a problem. Yeah, and they can't really do too much to some of the giants as well, especially with all the armor enhancement that is in place in the game for giants. They can definitely be a hard target for them. So yeah, thanks for your attention. If you want more content like this, I'm gonna try to do breakdown of all units from Mechabellum and maybe some additional content as well, if this is gonna be good in terms of views and stuff. So yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you're having a good day. Goodbye.